What up, party people? What up, YouTube? This is Chef, New Zealand Murder History Podcast. And I've got a pretty disturbing case to talk about today. It's pretty messed up. Yeah, so with no further ado, let's get into it. Operation Darlington, Mellory Manning murder. This episode of New Zealand Murder History Podcast isn't suitable for children. Kids, click off. Anyone suffering from PTSD or some kind of mental problem, also click off and see your doctor for support or call one of the many 0800 numbers available. My show is just for educational purposes and not to accuse anyone of murder. Operation Darlington is unsolved to this day. I don't know who killed Mellory Manning, but if I did, I would tell New Zealand police, and you should too. Anyone watching this show who knows something, saw something, even if it seems insignificant, go tell police, because we the New Zealand people, we failed Mellory Manning. She was pushed to the margins of society. The corner she was standing on had no CCTV, so we can't even be sure who picked her up. And everyone should be able to go to work and come home safe. Now let's look into Mellory Manning's life. Growing up in the South Island before going to work on Manchester Street, Christchurch, she was actually born in Nelson, where I'm filming right now. Her real name was Ngātai Lynette Manning. She grew up in Southbridge, South Canterbury, so a bit south of Christchurch, but not too far away. She spent a lot of time with her little brother Robin Manning and her big sister Jasmine. Home life was unstable at times. She never liked her stepdad. At a couple of points in her life, she was sent to stay with her grandparents in Granity, North Bulla district. Mellory Manning loved small town life in Granity, West Coast. Now I'm going to quote Rob Manning, Mel's little brother, from the Timaru Herald, 12th of March 2014 article, Mellory robbed of a chance at a better life. Quote, as a kid, Ngātai was a good kid. She was smart at school. She didn't one day think, I'm going to be a prostitute. Events happened in her life. Now she's dead, she's not suffering anymore. It's just really sad. Ngātai started going off the rails when she was about 13 or 14. She started running away with older men, which led her to Christchurch and the drug scene, end of quote. Mel was a girly girl who did ballet and was an excellent singer. Sadly, these good times that she had here and there growing up, well, they would not last. Now, I've read that Mellory Manning had some problems with drugs, but one article I read says that Mellory Manning, her test results from the night when she was murdered, she only tested positive for methadone and marijuana. Well, another article says she was positive for morphine, methadone, marijuana, and Valium. So, like I said before, it's really hard to know with this case. I mean, I would tend to think that, quite a few of the escorts, would be into hard drugs. I mean, especially of the girls who work on the street. I mean, I might be wrong. I might be ignorant thinking that. I'm not sure. But I would imagine that would be the case. Anyway, in the interview I did with Catherine Healy, which I'm going to have up on my channel if you want to check that out. Anyway, I said to Catherine that Mellory Manning probably fell off the wagon and was using drugs again, but she corrected me, stating that the methadone program is a maintenance thing and diazepam could have been given to her by her doctor as well, to deal with anxiety and stuff like that, etc. So, yeah. And also thinking about it now, morphine could also be on prescription. But I find it interesting if, in fact, she was on diazepam the night of the 18th of December 2008. Because you see, she hit the red light district at 9:30 p.m. Okay, let me give you a rundown of the timeline. Mellory Manning catches a lift with a bloke. This bloke tells her she looks great and gives her his cell phone number. He drops her off on the corner of Manchester and Peterborough Streets at 9:30 p.m. Mellory Manning rocks two clients, and both of them have been eliminated as suspects by the New Zealand police. So now it's 10:43 p.m. and she's texting some... Okay, so some sources say that she's texting a client, and other sources say that she's texting the bloke who picked her up hitchhiking in Riccarton. So I'm not really sure. But anyway, the cell phone data from the cell towers indicate Mellory Manning is travelling in a vehicle due to the speed the cell phone is travelling. I mean, that's what I would assume anyway, how they know she's in a car, because obviously the CCTV's not a thing. But I mean, they did use cell phone data, but what I'm saying is it's 2008, so they would have to triangulate the signal because it's before cell phones had GPS. As I recall, those days was all like Nokia brick days, you know? Yeah, so they would triangulate the cell phone data. But anyway, text messages she was sending, she wasn't really in a distressed state or nothing, you know, and that's got me wondering if she had been using a lot of diazepam that night. Maybe that's why she didn't have her guard up. I mean, why wasn't she texting asking for help? I mean, all accounts were that Mellory Manning was a very smart escort, and she wasn't new to the game at all, doing this work since she was a young teenager. Anyway, like I said, she was seen standing on the corner of Peterborough and Manchester Street, dressed in a pink miniskirt and a blue bikini top with white polka dots. Plenty of eyewitnesses seen her there, but yeah, as to whose car she got into, we don't know. Then at 10:59, she's tossed into the Avon River. Cause of death was blood loss, and her injuries were severe. Stabbed with different knives, bashed with a metal pole with a hook attached. You know, the kind of thing you would use to gaff a fish with. Stab wounds and the injuries from the metal pole total at 79. She was also beaten with a hammer. One source says hit with a small axe or tomahawk. And it doesn't end there. Mellory Manning was sex assaulted and tortured. Details of the torture were suppressed by court order. One of the most violent deaths one can think of. And the blokes who done this, well, you know, they're free to keep living their lives. I assume it was blokes, but, you know, maybe a female was involved. Like I said before, and I'll probably say it again before the end of this show. It's hard to know from the information available. Anyway, whoever done this to Mel may have moved from Christchurch, possibly even left New Zealand, could be in prison on other serious charges, or maybe just living in Christchurch. It was over 13 years ago now, so it's also plausible that one of her killers has since died themselves. The police do have one DNA sample on file from the autopsy, and it's no match to anyone on the New Zealand criminal database. This DNA profile is referred to as the male B profile. So yeah, that's the big question. Who is male B? And the answer is, we still don't know. Not yet, anyway. But anyway, Mellory Manning's real name is Ngātai Lynette Manning. No hating on sex worker comments in my comment section, people. Here in New Zealand, sex work is legal, so she really wasn't doing anything wrong. Now, Mellory Manning, yeah, she may have taken a few left turns in life, or wrong turns, no matter which way you want to put it. I mean, you know, she was jailed at least once, possibly twice. But, you know, did you always make the right choices? But did you? Well, anyway, there's a lot of information out there online that I find questionable, like the time of death. It's supposed to be before 10:59 on the night of December the 18th, 2008, because that's when Mellory Manning's watch stopped. Now, me personally, I'm not sure that she was thrown into the Avon River at 10:59. I'm not a coroner or a detective or nothing. I mean, I'm just a chef. And I don't think a watch stopped is a scientific way to say time of death. I mean, there must be criminals out there who would think of stopping a watch to throw off the timeline, you know? Anyway, we're going to come back to this later in the episode. First off, actually, you know what? Let's show some photos, because I think it's important. Is anyone out there, you know, I mean, this is a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So anyone out there might have seen this lady. That's Mel Manning. Yeah. That's the same pink miniskirt she was wearing. She's wearing a different bikini top in that photo, but that's how she was dressed the night she disappeared off the street and then, showed up murdered. Here's one of her more close up, so you can get a good look at her face. Yeah, anyone who knows anything, call 105 and mention Operation Darlington, Mellory Manning case. Alright, and there's a reward. There's a $50,000 reward for information and evidence leading to the conviction of persons who are responsible for the death of Ngātai Mellory Manning. Now, this is an old poster I'm showing you, but the reward still stands. It has a different phone number on this poster. It has 0800 Manning. I'm not sure if that's still an operation or not. It's 0800 626646. But yeah, if that's a decommissioned number, you just go call 105 and say you want to talk about Operation Darlington. Now here's where I'm going to point out who could have done this to Mellory Manning in more detail. One thing for sure, she was the intended target of people unknown, for reasons unknown. Well, it wasn't Kent Gorry, her boyfriend, and sometimes minder. Why would he want to kill the girl who makes money for the couple? I mean, why would he want to do that? What possible motive would he have? Police have ruled him out as a suspect. He is still considered a person of interest in the unsolved murder of Christchurch scrap dealer John Reynolds, killed on the 28th of April 1996. And as far as I can tell, and I haven't looked into that one a lot, but as far as I can tell, Kent Gorry, he probably didn't do that either. So that proves that the cops have been doing good police work and they're not just ruling people out willy-nilly, I mean, without good reason. Anyway, let's follow along from the someone she knew scenario. Mel Manning briefly dated Malcolm Chaston, who was one of the blokes that started the South Island Nazi Party gang. He's a serial sexual predator, currently behind bars for the Vanessa Pickering murder. He could do a crime like this, but again, police have ruled him out as a suspect. And because he's a major criminal, police would totally have his DNA on their criminal database. It could also be an unknown gang, not the Maori Mafia. Yeah, almost all gangs in New Zealand have a Christchurch chapter, but whoever done this, they had to have a place close to Manchester Street, or along towards Darlington Terrace if we're to believe the police timeline of events. Which I don't. Because if you think about it, you can't swing weapons like the ones that got used on Mel Manning inside a car. She wasn't killed outside in central Christchurch. Like, if she got killed in some random car park, or Hagley Park, for example, I mean, the cops would have found the crime scene. No, this happened at a private house or private address or something. It's also possible Mellory Manning's murder was a paid hit. I mean, the way she was targeted, although there is no evidence on the internet to suggest she was targeted, or why, but I mean, this whole thing just reads to me like somebody was out to get Mallory Manning personally. I don't think this was just some sicko that had it in for sex workers. I mean, if this was a random crime, it would have to be a serial killer or some seriously deranged lunatic, like some kind of stalker client or something that was like in love with her and mad and crazy. It just doesn't seem like that. Anyway, it's not impossible. Hayden Poulter was a guy who done some bad sex worker murders up in K Road, Auckland. So, I mean, they are out there. But anyway, could this all somehow be tied up in the drug trade? I've read a lot of articles that say Mallory Manning had actually cleaned up her life and was only smoking marijuana and was on the methadone program before she was killed. So, was this something from the past? Could a drug dealer she somehow crossed over God only knows what done this to Mel? Thing is, most drug dealers, they don't really want to murder sex workers. It's just, I mean, it'd be bad for business. I don't see why. Although people who are involved in drugs tend to have a lot of enemies as well, so, it's hard to know. I just don't know. It's like there's so much rage and violence that you might think whoever done this really hated Mallory Manning. I've read that Kent Gorry used a lot of morphine and is heavily into drugs, but I have no information to suggest this crime is somehow drug-related. I would also like to briefly point out I'm not sure about the police timeline in this case, but I do think the cops have done at least some good work. Also, they are running a $50,000 reward, which is a good idea. I guess what I'm saying is this show is more to bring attention to Operation Darlington, not for me to necessarily solve it. Anyway, shortly I'm going to discuss the Crown's theory on the 2014 court case against Moha Fawcett, in which the Crown they allege all sorts of stuff, but anyway. But what I just want to briefly point out is since that case, the Wellington Courts of Appeal have ruled Fawcett's confession inadmissible in court and quashed his conviction, so he's been let out of prison. Some details of the ruling are suppressed by court order, but some stuff was released to the media. Moha Fawcett has fetal alcohol syndrome and was high on P when he confessed to police. And this year, a Christchurch judge, Justice Rachel Dunningham, has ruled that Moha Fawcett cannot be retried for the murder, no matter what evidence is found in the future, going on to say that Moha Fawcett is like Taina Pora. But hey, why stop there? I reckon he's like Nelson Mandela. But yeah, for that reason, I'm not going to show pictures of Fawcett. Anyone who's followed this case in the media knows about the bloke I'm talking about. So his confession got ruled inadmissible. Judge declared he can't be retried for the murder. He was let out of prison. But anyway, so the case I'm talking about, the case against Fawcett, it's the Crown's theory in that case, and it was largely put together from Fawcett's confession. And basically, long story short, Fawcett's confession was that him and 4 other blokes, from the Maori Mafia Christchurch, they sex assaulted Mallory Manning before she was beaten and tortured, then stabbed her to death at their HQ, 25 Galbraith Street, in the inner city suburb of Avonside. Then she was thrown into the Avon River, where she was found by a jogger and a kayaker the next morning. 2 things I wish to clarify. Then we're going to reference this episode. First off, there are 2 Maori Mafia chapters in Christchurch, Aotearoa Mafia and Notorious Mafia, and they are enemies. Moha Fawcett was a gang prospect for Aotearoa Mafia at the time Mallory Manning was killed. Second point I wish to make is the Crown's theory. This is the Crown's theory, not my own. And Fawcett, since done several years for the murder, but now the Wellington Courts of Appeal have quashed his conviction. In his confession that he made to police, that was never really made public in full. If it was, then I can't find it. But over the 2014 court case, reports in the newspaper, TV 1 and 3 News, would discuss the confession and print bits and pieces of it. So now here's the thing. There's a lot of unknown in this case. I mean, either it was the Aotearoa Mafia boys, or it wasn't. And there's actually quite a lot of evidence to suggest either way as to their possible involvement. But, it's hard to know. And me personally, I actually just don't know. I mean, whoever done this murder, police believe there was a group of people. Different knives used, different weapons. So if it wasn't them, it probably was another gang. But, okay, let's source reference this one now. So we've got News Hub, New Zealand article written 10th of September 2021. Mellory Manning death. Fresh police probe sends shockwaves through sex work industry by Keisha Brownlee. Available on www.newshub.co.nz. Otago Daily Times. Mellory Manning cold case murder. Police launch fresh appeal into sex workers' murder. Written on the 10th of September 2021. And that one you can find on www.odt.co.nz. Stuff.co.nz article. Mellory Manning friend hopes her killers are haunted by their actions. Written by Martin Van Bainen on September the 10th, 2021. I've got more than that. There's bulk plenty. Check this out. TV1 News article. Former gang prospect relieved Mellory Manning murder charge dismissed. Written by Lisa Davies, 25th of October 2021. And that one's available on www.onenews.co.nz. Also, RNZ article. Multiple people involved in Mellory Manning's death. Police. So that's what police said, but that's the name of the article. Multiple people involved in Mellory Manning's death. Police. But anyway, that one's written on the 10th of September 2021, and you can find it on www.rnz.co.nz. This next one, stuff.co.nz, father will not grieve until killer is caught, written on the 7th of October 2011, available on www.stuff.co.nz. Yeah, I'm never too sure about some of those stuff.co.nz articles. I think they take a bit of creative license, as far as I can tell. Anyway, another one is New Zealand Herald. Mellory Manning, girl lost to the streets, tries to find a way out, and that's available on www.nzherald.co.nz. And then we got NZ Herald article, Mellory Manning cold case. Police launch fresh appeal into 2008 sex worker's death. 10th of September 2021. Written by Kurt Bayer. And of course that one's available on nzherald.co.nz. Also www.stuff.co.nz article, major development in Mellory Manning case. Accused Moha Fawcett released from jail. Written by Martin Van Bainen on the 2nd of October. And then it actually trails off there. I don't have the year for that one, but yeah, 2nd of October. Otago Daily Times article written 26th of October 2021. Man accused in Mellory Manning murder has charges dismissed. Stuff.co.nz article 13th of February 2014. Accused was looking for Manning by Jolie Daly on the that one's on www.stuff.co.nz. And lastly, we've got Pollen puts victim on mob patch, written on the 14th of February 2014, And that one's also on www.stuff.co.nz. So yeah, I did quite a lot of research researching this video. Alright, male B. Let's get back to it. Well, who is male B? I mean, that's the big question. And another big question is who would want to cause this kind of harm to Mellory Manning? I mean, if it was a bad client, I mean, they had to have been like serial killer bad. Because the level of violence is just way too high for a bad client murder. Also, bad clients don't typically carry multiple knives and different weapons and stuff around with them. I suppose some might carry one weapon, but they wouldn't usually have a whole arsenal like that. It's bizarre. And another question worth knowing the answer to is, where was she killed? Now, in the Crown's case against Moha Fawcett in the Christchurch High Court in 2014, the Crown alleges that she was killed at 25 Galbraith Street, Avonside. At the time, the Aotearoa Maori Mafia were using this building as their HQ, and that this crime was a gang initiation for gang prospect Moha Fawcett to earn his patch. Muck Dog, as he was known by his friends in the gang, would defend himself in court, and it didn't go well. Yeah, he got 20 years non-parole, life sentence, so for his part in the major crime, And anyway, Moha Fawcett, he received his sentence on March the 10th, 2014. Now, a lot of people in New Zealand are going to have varying opinions on who killed Mellory Manning. I mean, me personally, I find his confession credible. I am aware that he was on P and has been diagnosed as having fetal alcohol syndrome. I'm not disputing those facts, but the bit at the end of the confession where Mellory Manning was dying and Fawcett and the Aotearoa Mafia boys are standing around doing Nazi salutes and barking like dogs, I mean, that just sounds exactly like something they would do. I mean, however, I do know that there's actually quite a lot of evidence to suggest that it wasn't them. So, first let's finish up with the Crown's version of events in the 2014 case against Fawcett. Fawcett and a Mafia member were driving up Manchester Street and stopped to smoke a bong with a sex worker they knew. When the woman with name suppression, so nobody name her in my comments, we don't break suppression court orders and stuff on this channel. But yeah, anyway, when this woman with name suppression, she was in the car, and they were asking her if she'd seen Mellory Manning. Fawcett even going on to say that she owed them money. Alright, now I'm going to read you this whole article, because we're throwing around quite a lot of big words here. And I want to tell you guys where I'm getting this from. So, this is Accused Was Looking for Manning, and that's by Jolie Daly, 13th of February 2014 on www.stuff.co.nz. Murder accused Moha Huatahi Fawcett and a patched Maori Mafia member were looking for Christchurch prostitute Mellory Manning on the night she was killed, a court has heard. It is believed Manning, 27, was killed on or about the night of December 19th, 2008. The Crown said Manning was picked up from her usual spot on the corner of Manchester and Peterborough Streets in Christchurch and taken to a Maori Mafia pad on Galbraith Ave, Avonside, where she was raped, bashed with weapons, stabbed and strangled before her body was dumped in the Avon River. It says Fawcett, 26, was among those involved in the killing. A woman whose details are suppressed told the High Court trial of Fawcett in Christchurch today that she was told of the gang's search for Manning while sharing cannabis in a red car driven by Muck Dog, Fawcett's nickname, about 10:30 p.m. on December 18th. The woman said a patched Maori Mafia member had been in the front seat. The three of them shared 2 or 3 cones of cannabis for about 5 to 15 minutes while parked on the side of Manchester Street. between Kilmore and Peterborough streets. The pair asked her if she'd seen a chick called Mel. She said they were looking for her. She said, they said she was owing money. I assumed it was for drug money or something. Fawcett had done most of the talking, she said. She did not know Manning. She had seen someone standing on the corner of Peterborough and Manchester Street that night, but did not know it was Manning until later, she said. She got out of the car and Fawcett and the gang member drove away. They were going to have a look up the street just to see if she, brackets, Mel, was going to be out on the street, the woman said. She did not know where the car went. The trial has finished early today. Barrister Craig Rooney, who was appointed to assist Fawcett in the defence, will assist the court will cross-examine the woman tomorrow. Earlier, the court was told cell phone data suggested prostitute Mellory Manning was on the move at 10:43 p.m. on the night she was killed. Evidence heard today, the third day of the trial, focused on cell phone data from Manning's phone and one used by Fawcett and another gang member. Manning's body was found in the Avon in the morning of December 19th, 2008. December 19th, 2008, so that's the day after she was killed. Anyway, sequence of cell phone calls. The court has heard 9:31. Manning sent a text message to a stranger who gave her a ride into town, suggesting she arrived in the central city about that time. This went through the Morehouse Ave cell phone tower. 10:43, Manning received a text message from her second client of the night. This went through the Price Waterhouse Coopers building cell phone tower on Armac Street, suggesting she was near her corner. 10:43, Manning replied to her client. This went through the Beeley Ave West cell phone tower. A Vodafone radio frequency engineer said this indicated it was unlikely the phone was near the corner of Manchester and Peterborough Street at that time. 10:43, the second client sent a reply, but Manning's phone did not receive it. This suggested her phone was turned off. Meanwhile, a cell phone attributed to both Fawcett and another gang member was on the move around the same time, the court heard. The call was made from this phone at 10:43 and lasted just under a minute. During that call, the phone moved through two cell phone tower zones, suggesting the phone was moving north away from Manchester and Colombo Street area. However, the signals showed this phone was likely to be some distance away from Manning's phone. A text message received by this phone at 11:01 suggested it was back in the central city. Evidence from witnesses who were in Avon's side on that night included a scream being heard coming from the direction of the Maori Mafia address between 10 p.m. and midnight, and a splash and sounds of crinkling plastic and tarpaulin being heard on Avon's side around 11 p.m. Horrible screams heard. A horrible, blood-curdling, female-getting-attacked scream was heard on the night Manning was killed. The description came from a man giving evidence on day 2 of the trial. The witness, who has name suppression, so I don't know, this is a bloke now with name suppression, different witness, anyway, heard the scream while he was at his former partner's Avonside home, a few doors down from a Maori Mafia address on Galbraith Ave. It rang out sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, came from the direction of the gang address and lasted 10 to 15 seconds, the man said. However, he did not investigate because that was pretty usual for that area. Wow. Police believe Manning was murdered at that address after being picked up from the corner of Peterborough and Manchester Streets before her body was dumped in the Avon River. A loud splash was heard on Avon Drive about 11 p.m. the same day. A different man and woman had been talking outside an Avonside Street address near Morris Street. It was a big, direct down splash, the woman said. The man said he also heard some crinkling sound like plastic or a tarpaulin, both before and after the splash. He walked north along the river towards the sounds, but stopped dead cold and retreated because he knew something was not right. Both of them saw two cars, one of them red, drive past them about a minute apart. However, their evidence differed on vehicles' direction and whether they went past before or after the splash. The man said after the sound, a third truck-like vehicle started up and drove past them slowly about 5 kilometers an hour, heading south on Avonside Drive. When it came close, the driver turned the lights on full beam. It just crept past us. Whoever was in the vehicle was sussing us out, the man said. The trial continues. Yeah, so that was what that article had to say. Had a lot of different information to some of the other ones. But anyway. After Mellory Manning got killed, Fawcett went on the run. And that's one more red flag. But now I'm doing a quote from Christchurch Press article, A Tragic Miscarriage of Justice, written on the 11th of June 2022. This one's free to read on www.pressreader.com. Quote, 10 days after Manning's murder, Fawcett skipped town, leaving Christchurch in his red Toyota Corolla with a friend. He only made it as far as Blenheim when he crashed into a vineyard and abandoned the car. End of quote. Okay, so that's pretty weird. Now I'm going to read article, Pollen Puts Victim on Mob Patch. And this article is written by stuff.co.nz on the 14th of February 2014. Yeah, like I said, available on www.stuff.co.nz. Rare grass pollen found in Mellory Manning's nose and on her clothes was an exact genetic match to plants from a Maori Mafia pad, the murder trial has heard. Scientists who examined the pollen said it was so rare it was almost impossible it came from any other site in the world. That was because the rip-gut bromgrass growing at the pad at number 25 Galbraith Ave in Avonside experienced a genetic mutation in the summer of 2008, which happened nowhere else. Forensic palynologist Dallas Mildenhall today gave evidence on day 5 of the High Court trial of in Christchurch of Moha Huatahi Fawcett, 26. He denies murdering Manning on or about December 18th, 2008. The evidence baffled Fawcett, who, when asked if he had any cross-examination questions, said, "I'm confused about this one. I just might pass." The Crown says Manning was picked up from the corner of Manchester and Peterborough streets, taken to a Maori Mafia pad and fatally attacked before her body was dumped in the Avon River. Police took grass samples from the Galbraith Ave address shortly after Manning's murder, including from a concrete pad. Mildenhall examined the samples in early 2011. There was a genetic mutation at this site. That's why this is so unusual, Mildenhall says. For it to happen elsewhere would be remarkable. It is almost impossible. He compared the pollen with that found in abundant amounts on the back of Manning's cardigan, which was on her body in the river. It matched. The pollen had also embedded into the fabric of the cardigan, which showed it came in direct and foreseeable contact with the grass while she was lying on it. It could not have got so deep in the fabric if simply brushing past, he said. Mildenhall determined the concrete pad, as well as a spot about 20 to 30 meters away, could not be ruled as possible sites for the attack on Mrs. Manning. Mildenhall also examined pollen found in Manning's nasal cavities in a bid to determine where she died. This pollen also matched that from 25 Galbraith Ave. It did not match pollen samples from other locations, including the Avon River, Avonside Drive, and Darlington Terrace. Therefore, Mildenhall could not rule out the possibility that 25 Galbraith Ave was the site where Manning drew her last breath. Police identified 131 potential murders sites in the weeks after Manning's death. This was shortlisted to 32 sections, of which 19 were searched and investigated. Police believe her body entered the Avon River about 11 p.m. on December 18, 2008, leaving a short time frame which the fatal attack took place. The trial continues on Monday, and the Crown expects to finish evidence halfway through the fourth week. So, yeah, there was some evidence given in the case against Fawcett in 2014. I thought that was quite interesting. But now let's take a look. And, there's one thing I want to say is, there's... Mohar Fawcett had a lawyer who was, helping him with the case, but he was representing himself. And as you can hear from that article, it doesn't sound like he was very good at it. But apparently this lawyer who was helping him, the amicus curiae lawyer, he was even saying stuff that was contradicting what Fawcett was saying. So, he didn't get a fair trial. From what I'm reading here, anyway. So now let's take a look at the things that make Fawcett look not guilty. Number 1, his confession was ruled inadmissible in court due to Fawcett having fetal alcohol syndrome, and he was high on P when he confessed. Number 2, I don't see how the Aotearoa Mafia could pick up Mellory Manning at 10:43, take her to Galbraith Ave, which Google Maps says is a 7-minute drive away, 3.7k. If in fact Google Maps is accurate, of course. Maybe a shorter drive than 7 minutes. It's hard to know. But anyway, they take her to Galbraith Ave, sex assault her, and then as the confession goes, torture her, take turns stabbing her to death, then drive the body to Darlington Terrace, which actually isn't very far because if on the side of the river that Galbraith Ave is on, it's only one street away, but still, take her down there, throw her in the river at 10:59. I just don't see how they could do that. But I also don't see how anyone else could either. A professional hitman? Maybe. I don't know. Like I said before, I personally think the timeline is incorrect. Here in New Zealand, sometimes things can be, unfortunately, a wee bit budget and not necessarily international best practice. You can't just say she was tossed in the river at 10:59 because that's when her watch stopped. It doesn't sound like good science to me. How do we know? It was just an analog watch from what I'm reading in these reports. So, how do we know it didn't stop at 10:59 the day before? Did it even say AM or PM? I don't know. But anyway, there's also only one DNA profile, and it's of an unknown male, male B, and that's not Mohar Fawcett. So you would expect the New Zealand police to also have, most Maori Mafia members in the DNA criminal database, you'd assume. But, DNA evidence could have been lost when Mellory Manning was thrown into the river. It's possible her killers showered her, cleaned the body down, etc., but not in the time frame that police are working with. So it could be that Mohar Fawcett was involved in a much more minor way than the other blokes in the gang, him being a prospect at the time, so it's really very hard to know from the information available. May be maybe one of their associates from Australia or, anywhere really. And then they've since gone back to their country of origin. I mean, that could explain why the New Zealand police haven't found them all these years. And of course, that's quite a lot of evidence pointing away from Aotearoa Mafia gang. So, like I said before, there's a lot we don't know. And also, why would the Mafia use such a high level of violence? I mean, in the 2014 trial of Moha Fawcett, the Crown alleges the Aotearoa Mafia gang was extorting sex workers for protection money up and down Manchester Street. I think there's got to be more to it than that. I mean, even for the Mafia, this murder is bad. It's like, I think they must have had it in for Mellory Manning. Either that or it was a contract murder by someone who hated Mel. And this next point I'm going to discuss is probably unrelated, but we're going to take a little look at Mellory Manning's biggest sister, Jasmine. Information's very limited about her online, but anyway, Jasmine Manning was the oldest of 3 children, 2 years older than Mel, so 29 when she died. She died of a suicide in witness protection in Auckland, shortly after the death of her boyfriend. There's almost no information about Jasmine Manning online, but one article says that she ran in similar circles to her sister Mel. Now, could this mean sex work or the drug game, or both perhaps? I mean, what I'm wondering is if whoever had it in for Mel, was this the same person that Jasmine Manning was giving evidence against back in 1998? I mean, Jasmine and Mel did live together at times. In 10 years, it's a long time, but it's not that long. But nah, it's more likely the murder has nothing to do with Jasmine Manning. But I mean, without more information, it's really hard to know. And I sure would like to know more about Jasmine, but anyway. Let's finish with what we know about Moha Fawcett, from the media anyway. Police did do a search warrant of his flat and found no evidence linking him to the crime. So yeah, maybe it was the Mafia, maybe it wasn't. But this was a murder. You couldn't say that this was a serious assault that just got out of hand and the victim died. Also, the violence went from 0 to 100. I mean, 10:43, she's alive and well, standing on the corner of Peterborough and Manchester Streets. Then 10:59, her watch stops, apparently because she was thrown into the River Avon. But like I said before, I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, in conclusion, well, either the Maori Mafia Aotearoa chapter hit Mellory Manning in some kind of planned attack, or somebody else did. I started writing this a long time ago. I wrote it, scrapped it, and wrote it again until I was blue in the face. I read every article online and I interviewed Catherine Healy. But I still don't know who killed Mellory Manning. The end. Yeah, that case is pretty... it's a hard one to research. A lot of the information online is... it's choppy at best, Some articles will say something completely different to other articles. So it's very hard to know. But anyone out there who does know, call the NZ cops and say you want to talk about Operation Darlington on 105 non-emergency number. All the best, people. Stay safe. Have a good one.